The birth and the betrayal. The wind swept across the prairie in long, hollow sighs, rattling the shutters of the Whitford homestead. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of wood smoke and sweat. Elena Whitford lay exhausted on the narrow bed, her chest rising and falling as she cradled two tiny bundles against her breast. The babies, wrapped in rough linen, whimpered softly before settling into fragile sleep. Twin girls, Anna and Clara, born in the dead of winter. Elena should have felt joy. She had longed for motherhood since her marriage to Thomas, dreaming of laughter filling the quiet rooms of their farmhouse. Yet the moment the midwife announced the children's gender, silence had fallen like a curse. Her husband's mouth tightened, his eyes sliding away. The in-laws, who had hovered nearby, exchanged looks darker than the storm clouds that often shadowed their land. Margaret Whitford, tall and sharp-eyed, broke the silence first. "Two girls," she said flatly, her voice stripped of celebration. "No heirs. No future." Samuel grunted his agreement, leaning heavily on his cane. "A waste of strength. A Whitford man deserves sons." Elena felt the words like a blade across her skin. She pressed the babies closer, her heart aching with both love and dread. She had given life, yet the very act seemed to have condemned her in this house. Thomas stood by the hearth, silent, his broad shoulders casting a shadow against the firelight. Elena searched his face, desperate for a flicker of warmth, of loyalty, but his expression was unreadable. He neither defended her nor rebuked his parents. He only stared into the flames, as though the crackling would held more interest than his newborn daughters. The midwife, sensing the tension, gathered her things quickly and slipped out into the cold night. Her absence left Elena alone with the judgment of the family she had married into. Margaret advanced, her gaze hard as flint. "You've weakened this family, girl. Daughters will not carry the Whitford name forward. You've failed in your duty." "I have not failed," Elena whispered, her voice trembling but resolute. "They are healthy, strong. That is no failure." "Healthy girls," Samuel spat, his lip curling. "Girls are burdens, mouths to feed without return. Mark me, Margaret, the curse of her blood runs deep." Elena's hands tightened around her children. She had known her in-laws were stern, proud people, but she had never imagined they could despise innocent infants for being born female. Her gaze flicked again to Thomas, pleading silently for support, for any sign that he would shield her from their cruelty. At last he spoke, though not to her. "Enough," he said quietly. Yet his words carried no conviction. He did not rebuke his parents, nor did he move closer to his wife. His distance was louder than any accusation. As the days passed, the atmosphere within the farmhouse grew heavier. Margaret muttered about omens whenever the babies cried at night. Samuel shook his head, muttering that daughters could never inherit land, never work it as men could. Elena's joy in motherhood became shadowed by unease. She noticed Thomas's absences more keenly now, long rides into town, late returns under the cover of darkness. Rumors reached her through whispers carried by neighbors. Thomas seen at the tavern, Thomas lingering in the company of a widow with laughing eyes. At first, Elena dismissed them as idle talk meant to wound. But the evidence mounted, a ribbon tucked carelessly in his coat pocket, the faint perfume that clung to him after his late returns. Each clue was a nail driven into the coffin of her trust. She confronted him once, voice low so as not to wake the twins. "Thomas, where do you go at night?" He looked at her with cool detachment, as though she were a servant overstepping her place. "To town," he said simply. "To matters that concern you not." "Matters," she pressed, her heart pounding. "Or another woman?" He said nothing, only turned away, shoulders rigid, leaving her to sit in silence with her crying children. His silence spoke more loudly than denial ever could. The betrayal gnawed at her, but it was the whispers she overheard one evening that chilled her blood. Standing just beyond the parlor door, she caught Margaret's voice, sharp and cruel. "She weakens this house. Best rid of her before she ruins us completely. The girls can be left to another's care." Samuel's reply was a low growl. A quiet end. No one would question it. The land is harsh. Accidents happen. Elena's knees nearly buckled beneath her. She clutched the doorframe, pressing a hand over her mouth to stifle a cry. They wanted her gone, not cast out, but erased. When she dared glance at Thomas, she saw no outrage, no protest. He sat silent as the fire popped and hissed, his eyes fixed on the flames. His silence was worse than his parents' words, for it confirmed what she feared most. She could not count on him to save her. Elena slipped back to her room, her daughters staring in their cradle. She looked down at them, so small, so perfect, so undeserving of the hatred directed toward them. Fear churned within her, but so did determination. If no one in this house would defend her, she would find a way to defend herself. She kissed each child's forehead and whispered a vow into the darkness. I will not let them take you from me. I will not let them take me. Outside, the wind howled across the barren fields, carrying with it the promise of trials yet to come. The threat and the escape. Snow clung to the fields in a brittle crust, the kind that cracked underfoot with every step. Winter pressed against the walls of the Whitford homestead, but the chill that crept into Elena's bones came not from the wind outside, but from the malice festering within. Days had passed since she overheard her in-laws plotting her removal, yet their words echoed relentlessly. Every glance from Margaret seemed sharper, every silence from Thomas heavier. Elena nursed her daughters in the dim light, her mind racing with fear. She could not remain in this house. Still weak from childbirth, she felt trapped, caught between the frailty of her body and the threat closing in. Margaret made no effort to hide her disdain. The girls cry too much, she declared one morning, her voice like vinegar. It is a sign. Their mother feeds them with weakness. They are infants, Elena replied softly, but her defense only drew laughter. Samuel slammed his cane against the floor. You speak too freely for a woman in your position. Be silent. Elena lowered her gaze, her pulse quickening. She had learned that resistance only fanned their cruelty. What frightened her most, however, was Thomas's passivity. He sat at the table with bread in hand, eyes fixed on nothing, unmoved by his parents' venom. His silence was the loudest betrayal of all. One evening, while gathering linens in her husband's chamber, Elena found proof of what she had long feared. Beneath the edge of his pillow lay a folded scrap of parchment. Curiosity battled dread, but at last she unfolded it. The words were clumsy but unmistakable, sentiments of affection, written by another woman. I wait for you at dusk. Come soon, before the snow grows deep. Elena's hands shook as she read the note again and again, her heart splintering. He had not only abandoned her emotionally, he had given his loyalty elsewhere. Her marriage, already fragile, was nothing more than a husk. When Thomas returned that night, smelling faintly of perfume, she could not bear to confront him. She turned her face away in bed, her tears hidden in the dark. The man she had once trusted now belonged to another, and the family she had married into plotted her destruction. It was Margaret who pressed the blade of fear deeper. You look pale, Elena, she said one afternoon, watching her with cold eyes. Some women do not survive childbirth. Sometimes their hearts give out in the weeks that follow. If such a fate befell you, who would question it? The words struck like ice. Elena managed a reply, though her throat was dry. I'm not so easily broken. Margaret's smile was thin and merciless. We shall see. That night, while the twins slept, Elena packed what little she could. 2 swaddling blankets, a flask of water, and the smallest parcel of bread. She moved silently, her every breath a prayer that the creaking floorboards would not betray her. Her daughters stirred softly as she lifted them into her arms, their warmth pressed against the chest. The farmhouse groaned in the wind, its walls bearing witness to generations of Whitfords. Elena felt no attachment to its history now. It was no longer her home, it was her prison. She stole one last glance at Thomas as he lay asleep beside the hearth, his face lit by the fire's dying glow. Even then, even knowing his betrayal, her heart twisted with sorrow. She had loved him once, wholly and without reserve. That love now lay buried beneath silence, infidelity, and neglect. Pulling her cloak tight, she slipped into the night. The cold bit into her skin instantly, sharp as needles. Snow crunched beneath her boots, muffled by the whistling wind. The prairie stretched vast and merciless, yet freedom, however uncertain, was better than waiting for death within those walls. Elena walked until her legs burned, pausing only to soothe the twins when they whimpered. Her breath clouded before her, her strength waning with each mile. She had no clear destination, only the hope of reaching a road, a village, anywhere that offered safety. Hours passed, and the sky hung heavy with stars. The moonlight turned the snow into a pale ocean, endless and unforgiving. Elena's body trembled with fatigue, but still she pressed on. She thought of Margaret's voice, of Samuel's sneer, of Thomas's silence, and each memory pushed her another step forward. At last, when her knees threatened to give way, a faint glow appeared on the horizon. A farmhouse, its windows flickering with lamplight. Relief surged through her, so sudden it brought tears to her eyes. She staggered closer, clutching her daughters to her chest. The dogs barked first, their cries piercing the night. A door creaked open, spilling warm light into the snow. A man's figure filled the threshold, broad-shouldered, with weary eyes that softened when they fell upon her. Jonas Hale, the widow of farmer. Elena collapsed to her knees before she could speak, the twins staring against her chest. Jonas rushed forward, catching her before she fell into the snow. "Good Lord," he murmured, lifting her gently. "You'll freeze out here. Come inside." As he carried her across the threshold, Elena clung to consciousness, her daughters safe in his arms. She did not know what fate awaited her here, but she knew one thing with certainty. Anything was better than the death her in-laws had planned. The door shut behind them, sealing out the winter's fury, the widower's kindness. The warmth of the farmhouse enveloped Elena like a blanket, a sharp contrast to the biting cold outside. She sank into the chair by the hearth, her arms still wrapped protectively around her daughters. The fire crackled, its glow softening the rough-hewn beams and the well-worn table. Jonas Hale moved quietly about the room, setting aside his lantern and stoking the flames higher. "Drink," he said, placing a steaming mug of broth before her. His voice carried the timbre of a man accustomed to silence, yet it held no harshness. Elena's trembling hands lifted the cup, and the warmth seeped into her fingers before it reached her lips. "Thank you," she whispered, her throat raw. Jonas inclined his head, settling onto the bench across from her. His eyes, dark as freshly turned soil, studied her without intrusion. He did not demand answers, nor did he scold her for arriving at his door in the dead of night. He only waited, patient as the earth itself. The twins stirred, and Elena adjusted the blankets around them. Their tiny breaths rose and fell against her chest. For the first time since their birth, she felt a measure of safety. After a long silence, Jonas spoke. "You walked far." Elena nodded, unable to meet his gaze. Words tangled in her chest. Fear, shame, desperation. At last she managed. There was no choice. Jonas did not press further, though a shadow passed over his face. He leaned back, his broad shoulders catching the firelight. "You'll not last in this weather without shelter. You and the babe stay here until you've your strength again." The generosity in his tone startled her. She had expected suspicion, perhaps even rejection. "I cannot impose," she murmured. He shook his head. "You've no imposition. I've room, and little enough company." His eyes flickered briefly toward the hearth, where an old rocking chair stood empty, its cushions worn but carefully kept. Elena followed his gaze and understood. His wife had once sat there. Jonas's story was whispered through the settlement. A wife lost in childbirth, the babe with her. A man hollowed by grief, working his land alone. Elena had pitied him from afar, never imagining she would find herself within his walls. The hours passed in quiet rhythm. Jonas fetched clean linens for the cradle, guiding her to rest the twins in its embrace. She hesitated before parting with them, but the cradle, though old, was sturdy, carved with care. The babies settled quickly, soothed by the warmth. "You've a gentle hand," Jonas remarked, watching her smooth the blankets. Elena's lips curved faintly, the ghost of a smile. "They deserve gentleness. It is the only thing I can give them." Jonas studied her then, his gaze steady. You give more than that. You carried them through the snow. That takes strength. His words pierced her defenses. She turned away, hiding the tears that pricked her eyes. Strength was the last thing she felt. Yet his quiet affirmation lit something small within her, a fragile ember of hope. Days slipped into weeks. Elena regained her strength slowly, her cheeks regaining color, her daughters growing rounder with each feeding. Jonas tended his fields, chopped wood, and mended tools, yet always found time to help with the infants. He cradled them with surprising ease, rocking them in his great hands as though they were precious glass. In the evenings, when the work was done, they shared meals at the table. Jonas spoke little of himself, but when he did, his words revealed a man who had endured loss yet refused bitterness. Elena found herself drawn to that steadiness, a balm to her wounded spirit. And yet, beneath the quiet routine, tension simmered. She knew the Whitfords would not let her absence go unanswered. She saw it in Jonas's guarded looks toward the road, in the way he checked the latch twice each night. One evening, as snowflakes drifted against the window panes, Elena finally gave voice to her fear. They will come for me. Jonas set down his cup, his jaw tightening. Then they'll find they cannot take what is not theirs. His certainty startled her. You do not know them. Margaret's hatred runs deep, and Thomas, her voice faltered at the memory of her husband's silence. He will not protect me. Jonas leaned forward, his eyes locking with hers. Then I will. The words hung in the air, simple yet profound. In them lay a promise she had longed to hear from Thomas but never had. A promise not of possession, but of defense. Her heart thudded unevenly. She wanted to believe him, wanted to rest in the shelter of his assurance. Yet trust, once shattered, was slow to mend. Still, that night, when he carried the twins to their cradle and brushed a calloused hand against Clara's cheek, Elena's chest ached with something she dared not name. As the fire dwindled to embers, she lay awake, listening to the steady rhythm of Jonas's movements in the next room. For the first time since her marriage, she did not feel alone in the darkness. But beyond the fragile peace, a shadow loomed. The Whitfords would not surrender their hold so easily, and Elena knew the quiet refuge she had found could not remain untouched forever. Confrontation and new beginning. The thaw of spring had barely begun when the Whitfords arrived. Elena saw them first through the window, 3 riders cresting the ridge, their silhouettes sharp against the pale horizon. Margaret sat rigid in her saddle, Samuel hunched but unyielding, and Thomas rode behind them, his head bowed as though weighed down by his own shadow. Elena's breath caught. She had known this day would come, yet dread still rooted her to the floor. Jonas, sensing her stillness, followed her gaze. His eyes hardened. "Stay inside," he said quietly, reaching for the rifle by the door. "No," she whispered, her voice trembling but resolute. "I must face them." Jonas studied her a moment before nodding. "Then you won't face them alone." The riders approached the farmhouse, their horses stamping restlessly in the thawing mud. Margaret dismounted first, her skirts snapping in the wind. Her gaze swept over Elena with the cold satisfaction of a hawk sighting prey. "You've made quite the spectacle," Margaret declared, "running off into the night like a thief. Did you think you could shame us without consequence?" Elena stepped forward, her hands trembling at her sides but her chin lifted. "I left because you plotted my death." Samuel spat into the dirt, his cane clutched like a weapon. "You imagine too much. You are unfit, that is all. A danger to the future of this family." Jonas moved between them, his presence filling the space with quiet authority. "The only danger I see is standing before me," he said, his voice steady. "You speak of family honor, yet you would destroy a mother for giving life." Margaret's lips thinned. "This is none of your concern, Hale. She belongs to the Whitfords." Elena's heart lurched. For years she had accepted that word. Belonged. A wife to Thomas, a servant to his parents, her worth measured only by the heirs she produced. But here, with Jonas beside her, the truth flared like fire in her chest. She did not belong to them. She never had. "I am no one's possession," Elena said firmly, her voice carrying across the yard. "I am a mother, and I will raise my daughters free from your cruelty." For a moment, silence reigned, broken only by the restless snorts of the horses. Then Margaret's face twisted with rage. "Ungrateful wretch! You dare defy us after all we gave you." Jonas's eyes narrowed. "What you gave was nothing but chains. If you've come to drag her back, you'll leave disappointed." Samuel's cane struck the earth. "And if we do not leave?" Jonas's hand tightened on his rifle, though he kept it lowered. "Then you'll learn this farm stands against tyranny, no matter whose name it carries." Thomas finally dismounted, his boots sinking into the thawing ground. For a moment, Elena searched his face for some flicker of the man she had once loved. But all she found was weariness and the faint shame of a coward. "Say something, Thomas," she demanded, her voice sharp with years of swallowed hurt. "Tell them the truth. Tell them what you've done." His eyes darted to Margaret, then back to Elena. His lips parted, but no words came. His silence was answer enough. So Elena spoke for him. "You betrayed me. While I carried your children, you warmed yourself in another's arms, and still you let them call me cursed." Margaret hissed, but Jonas's voice cut through the tension. "Her truth has weight, Thomas. Do you deny it?" Thomas lowered his gaze. He did not. The Whitfords' authority cracked in that instant, their facade of honor shattered by silence more damning than confession. Margaret's fury faltered, Samuel's bluster waned, and Thomas shrank into himself. Elena drew a breath, the air sharp in her lungs. "Leave us. You have no power here." For a long moment, Margaret stood rigid, as if carved from ice. Then she turned sharply, mounting her horse with stiff grace. "You will regret this," she spat, though her voice lacked conviction. Samuel followed, muttering curses, and Thomas mounted last, his face pale with defeat. Without another word, they rode back across the ridge, their figures shrinking against the vast horizon. Silence fell over the yard, broken only by the distant cry of a bird. Elena's legs trembled, but Jonas's steady hand found her shoulder, grounding her. "They won't trouble you again," he said softly. Elena turned to him, her throat tight with emotion. "You risked everything for me, for girls not even your own." Jonas's gaze softened, his hand brushing against hers. "Blood doesn't make family. Choice does, and I choose to stand with you." Her heart swelled, fragile yet fierce. For the first time since her marriage, she felt not abandoned, but cherished. That evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in strokes of gold, Elena rocked Anna and Clara by the hearth. Jonas sat nearby, carving wood with practiced hands, the steady rhythm filling the quiet. The farmhouse no longer felt foreign. It felt like home. Elena looked down at her daughters, their tiny faces peaceful in sleep, and whispered a promise into the firelit air. "You will grow in love, not in fear." The past lay behind her like a fading shadow. Ahead stretched a future she had never dared imagine. A future built not on silence and betrayal, but on kindness, resilience, and the hope of new beginnings.